what happened was the holy ones, the holy beings that I talk about, which is Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, and many others, a few of them actually appeared in the room one at a time through these nights. And they were talking to me about my work, and they were talking to me about what to do with it, and they were talking to me about my family. My name is Adam Miller, and I live in the United States in Arizona. I am 65 years old. Yeah, I'm an old guy. And my first death experience, I had 3 death experiences, 3. So it's not just one. And before that, and leading up to that, the way that happened was, when I was young, I started figure skating at 2 years old. And I became a competitive ice skater for many, many years. I ended up figure skating for 42 years in total. So what happened was, when I was very young, I overskated. And so I was, working my body out very heavily. And I contracted double pneumonia. So that's a little bit about, who I was and what I was before the near-death experience. So the first near-death experience was in 1977, and back in the 70s. And I became very ill with double pneumonia. And I was in Los Angeles training for national competition for figure skating. And I just overworked. So I went to do a jump, and I was in the middle of the air, and the world went black. There was absolutely nothing. So I woke up in the hospital. There's an American saying that goes, you woke up dead. So I woke up dead, all right? And the doctors were looking at me, and they said that I had both lungs filled up to here with pus and blood. My temperature was 108. And so they put me in a vat of ice. And so it brought the temperature down. But when they took me back out of the ice procedure, then it went back up. And it went back up really high. So it was like 109 point something. And my heart stopped. So the first thing that happened was there was a guy standing there. So there was just this man standing there in a white robe and blue jeans. Okay, so he was standing there in a white robe and blue jeans, bare feet, and he had his arms crossed. And he said, well, I would like to take you to a place. And there are individuals there that will explain what is going on with you, because I had no idea. I was an 18-year-old child. I had no education whatsoever in anything supernatural. I was a Christian Methodist, and God was out there somewhere. So I didn't really have any idea about what was happening. So he took me to this building, and there were 72 stairs, which turned out to be a sacred number in the universe, by the way. And he said, well, start to walk up those stairs and watch what happens. So when I placed my foot on each stair, they lit up in millions and millions of tiny stars. When I tell this to people, it's one thing, but to experience the magnificence and the glory about what's actually out there is a completely different scenario. So I finally got to the top of this stairway, and there was this giant building there. And, this same man asked me to, go into this building. So when I went inside, I got my second shock. So the second shock was, it was a huge building. And inside the entire building was full of angels. So they were every size that you can imagine. So there were very small angels, and there were kind of the mid-size angels, which are called seraphims, by the way. And then on the four corners of the building, there were what's called the great archangels, which I think, everybody's heard about those. So I continued down this building, and at the end of the building, there was a podium there. And there were people / holy beings. I call them holiness. So that's how I referred to them then, and that's how I refer to them now. And when I got to where they were, there was a woman who was closest to me, and I noticed that above her head, she had a halo. And she was very beautiful, and she had this aura about her of being very, very calm and even. And she invited me to the podium and asked me to sit down. She said that her name was Mother Mary, and sitting next to her was a guy named Saint Germain, and then there was many other holy beings, which would take me a long time to explain. And basically, she told me that the place that I was in was called the place of change. It is the place in which all humans, when they are either entering a body or exiting one, like I was, come and they talk to what's called the Holy Council. So she asked me a few questions about my life and asked me what I wanted and various other things like that. And so basically what we came up with was I had a few choices. And one of those choices was that I could return to the earth, because they explained that I wasn't really dead, that I had a cord that was between my physical body on the earth and where I was in the holy building there. And so the other choice would be that I could go to what's called the Universal College. Believe it or not, there's actually a school there, okay? So there's this school, and you can go and you can learn many, many things that have to do with universal law and how everything works. So I'm fascinated with education. I always have been. And so I chose to go to the school. So I went to the school for a period of about 2 weeks, and I graduated, and I actually had a physical graduation certificate. Now, one of the things I want to say about that school is that all the people there that were teaching the classes, by the way, there was like 1 million souls in each class. It was absolutely huge and very beautiful. All of those instructors had wings, so that's very interesting. And I came back to the place of change that I explained in the middle part of this story, and re-spoke to the holy individuals there, and they said, "You graduated from the school, and it's time to go back." So, like a flash of a light, what I had happen next was instant. And I found myself back in the hospital after all that experience, and like nothing had happened. So as time went on, I had a girlfriend who injured her ankle in the show. And I just suddenly had a rush of this energy, and I ran over to this girl, and I just put my hands on the injured area on her ankle. And I could just feel this glorious feeling of like somebody had just poured stars over the top. And she said, "Well, I feel better." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Well, I feel better." And so I started going, "Well, okay, well, what's happening?" So I talked to her the next day, and she was out there skating, right? So she was actually out there skating after breaking an ankle. And I started realizing that my death experience maybe had something to do with what just happened. So I started looking into meditation. I started looking at alternative ways of believing, and I started, thinking in these sorts of ways. Now, when that happened, it was about 1983 or so. So I was in the skating show until '98. And during that period of time, to make a long story short, I ended up working on over 500 different skaters with at least a couple different thousand injuries, and started having great success and realizing that my death experience actually became more of a calling. It became more of a spiritual way to see God, if you will, or however you want to look at this. I'm such an open person that I don't really call it God. I call it, universe. Okay. So after all this healing work started happening, I really began to feel that I had another direction in my life. So I got out of the show and I started thinking about that. And I started in '98 with just a little ad that just said, if anybody has any kind of injury, or they have, physical problems or mental problems or emotional problems or spiritual problems, whatever, I felt like I was a pretty good counselor, and by then I'd had a lot of experience, and I started to work on people. Well, that from '98 till right now turned into a full-time job, working and healing things that have to do with body, mind, and spirit. Now, I need to be clear about that for a second. I don't do that. I do not believe that any human is capable of that. I just do not believe that. What I do believe is that the universe does call on people, however, to be a kind of witness to these types of things. And you can feel that type of calling. You'll have an idea inside here and inside here what that is for you. And it begins to transform how you feel, how you act, and it also puts you in a space of where you start feeling a lot less limited, would be a good word. I think a lot of people that are what I call unconscious, to where they either don't have any faith at all, or they have some, but it's abstract to them. They don't have a real good direction. And one of the things I've been doing in my work this whole time is getting people to get in that direction. I call it the universal corridor of knowledge. And they can begin to expand. Because what really happens with all of us when we come down here is I believe in one lifetime after another. Okay, so I just don't think that a person has one lifetime. That's ridiculous. Like, you're going to learn everything at once? I don't think so. So once people start to get that, and once they start realizing that, hey, there's a lot of things you can learn in this life, but it's probably going to take a long time and a long succession of becoming a conscious individual in which you can make yourself to the point of where you know yourself and you know your universe and you know the connection between those two. And the only way that we're going to get anywhere with this is spiritually. The only thing that defines us between animals and ourselves is spirit and the development of that spirit. And through doing so, what we do is we center ourselves to the point in which we can create anything if we choose. Anything, I should say, anything positive, okay? And anything creative and anything developmental, that we can use to help ourselves and others. Because what everybody has forgotten is the word unity. The word unity. Because Abraham Lincoln said it best, right? So together we stand and divided we fall. And because that's the case, we need to start with holiness first. People try to, fill that empty hole all the time. They try to buy things and get things and become more rich and more important and more powerful or whatever. And the more you do that, the less you feel like you're whole. You have to stop and realize that everything you need, you were born with. And everything you are is right there at your fingertips if you're willing to slow down enough, long enough, to listen. And when you do so, you begin to develop and expand and become more. Somewhere in that 2013 era, I was carrying a couch down some stairs, and I wasn't feeling real good. So as I was going down the stairs, I started to become faint. And about the middle way of the stairs, I blacked out. So long story short, I went down to the bottom of the stairs with the couch. Okay. And I woke up in the hospital again. And what had happened is my appendix burst. So obviously I chose the surgery, and it was an 8-hour period of trying to get the bad blood out and the new blood in by transfusion. In the meantime, the peritonitis had done so much damage. And if you remember, I already had the pneumonia from before. So my body wasn't the best, probably. And I died again. So this time it was different. This time I just appeared in the holy building. This time they were waiting for me. And they said to me, "You are on the wrong track." And what they meant is that at that point, I was actually in a bad marriage. I was not with an abusive person. I was just in a situation that was unhealthy. And even though I was working with people, and even though I was totally fine that way and so on, I wasn't taking care of this. Even though I was taking care of other people, I wasn't taking care of this. And I think what happens with practitioners is that's very common. They have a tendency to work with everybody else, and kind of forget about yourself. So the holy ones were explaining that to me. They were saying you got to redirect, you got to re-pull in, and our advice is basically that you get out of that situation and take some time to be with yourself. So I got through the surgery. My heart started up. They had to hit me with paddles 3 times because my body just didn't want to come back, just didn't want to. It was really, really weak. One of the things I want to say about this whole entire thing, which I would like people to hear, is that at that point I was drinking, right? So I was actually drinking alcohol. So I had too much wine. I don't mean hard alcohol, and I don't mean drunkards, and I don't mean any of that. What I mean is I just had too much because my marriage was a shambles, and everything was a mess, and I was unable to cope with it. So, I think one of the most important things about these types of podcasts are that people understand the surrounding events that happen with near-death experiences, and understand that near-death experiences are not glorious, they're not easy, and I don't want anybody to think that by having a near-death experience that you become all-knowing, or that you become better, or that you become something else. What you become is expanded. However, you still have to live in the human body, and you still have to deal with your human conditions. So back to my story, when I came out of the hospital, I immediately got a divorce, and I moved in with some people that were just very alternative in their thinking and had a good way of expressing themselves, and they had a much healthier lifestyle. And so I took a few years without working with anybody, and I kind of called it even for a little while, and I just took a break. So that's the second one, right? So let's go through the years a little bit. So after that, I went back to work in about another 2 years. And I worked along for a while and worked along for a while. And then I'm going to bring you up to more or less current. So about 14 years ago, I met my wife, right? Now, what's really funny about that is that my name is Adam and my wife's name is Eve. Okay, so it's Adam and Eve, like in the Bible, all right? Which is really, really lovely, all right? And so we went along and we did pretty good. And for the first 5 years or so, I did pretty darn good. There is an event which I will tell you about that's not exactly a death experience, but I had an experience, so I want to include it, if that's okay. So we went along, and all of a sudden, I ended up getting some kidney stones. Well, those kidney stones ended up turning into an infection. So back in the hospital again, and what happened was this. They removed the kidney stones, and I got to spend, I think it was 5 or 6 nights in a hospital room, but I was totally alone. And that was here in Arizona. I live in Tucson, Arizona, by the way. And what happened was the holy ones, the holy beings that I talk about, which is Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, and many others, a few of them actually appeared in the room one at a time through these nights. And they were talking to me about my work, and they were talking to me about what to do with it, and they were talking to me about my family and my future. So, and it's funny because I have a lot of people go, oh, well, that means you can tell the future, right? And I'm like, no, okay, I'm not psychic at all. So let's forget that. What does happen, though, is universal things are set in a certain way, and they do create, large events. Not so much small ones, but large events. So they talk to me a lot about large events. So I have a pretty good idea what's coming up for the United States in the next 4 years, by the way. And I do talk to people about that. 4 years ago, I was walking down the hallway. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just hit the floor. Boom. And I had no idea what was happening. Neither did my wife. And, she drugged me over to the hospital once again, and I couldn't breathe, right? So I couldn't get a breath. I'd never had anything like that whatsoever. I mean, I've been figure skating for 40 years and so on and so forth. I'm in pretty good shape. Even at 65, I'm in good shape still. But at that point, for whatever reason, I ended up getting very small blood clots, which is known as pulmonary embolism. And so I had no idea I had them. They're microscopic. They have no symptoms whatsoever. And I had one lodged right here. And it was blocking the oxygen to the brain. And so that's what was happening. And most people's oxygen's about, 80 or 90 out of 100. And my oxygen was 30. So I had no oxygen at all. So they drove me to the hospital, and the doctor said, you're having a pulmonary embolism, and we need to take you in immediately. And so they took me in immediately, and the minute I hit the table, I died again. Now, this time was a different scenario. This time, when I went out, the guy I told you about in the beginning of this story was waiting. There was no building. There was no other people. It was kind of dark, and just this one man was there. Now, I'm going to tell you who it is, okay? So from the very beginning, I've always known that that was Jesus the Christ. I've always known it from the beginning. And so, since I knew who he was, I knew that I was probably going to get a talking to about something. And he said, listen, you are giving out all your life's energies to others. You are a fantastic practitioner of alternative healthcare, and you're giving out all your energies in a way, at your age, you can't do that. You can do it when you're 30 and when you're 40 and even when you're 50, but you can't do it when you're, 60. You have to slow down. You have to pay attention. You have to draw in and learn to be level and not be so excitable and not get in. See, here's the thing about my work, which I need to say. So I have about 75 to 95% success rate, regardless of what the disease is, or malady of any type, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it doesn't matter, to about 90%. So that's very good. But if you think about it for a minute, I also lose people. They die. And I've had many people, I've probably seen 50,000 people, okay? So of those, 500 died. That's a very large amount of trauma to go through, for me. It is for anyone. And so I was overdoing it, and I was over getting involved, and I was over putting the heart out too much and not staying level enough. And so my heart and my body and my system got overstimulated, and it created my death once again. Now, after that, I think is a very important thing. So after all of that, by the way, I'm in good shape these days, and I feel really good, and I'm working. But I took 4 years off. And I have 3 children, by the way, right? I have a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So we have a lot happening. And I turned inward, back to the great Buddha, and back to the things I believe, and took the time to repair this. So now when I work, now it's very easy on me, and I don't overdo it. I had an experience in the first death experience that I can tell you about in regards to that. Would you like to know that? So there is not necessarily a hell per se. However, they call it the place of waiting. And it's where spirits go when they've either been violent, or they've been abusive in some way, or they just didn't treat even themselves well. And what happens in that place is you have to go there before you can graduate to something higher, like I was explaining earlier. And there are instructors there that will work with you for as long as it takes to bring the spirit back up to the point of which you can participate in the universal beings arena, in a positive manner, and there's no threat to the other beings that are there. So there is a place, you can call it hell if you want, but in my experience, it was called the place of waiting, and it has things that, they don't let you leave, okay? And you have to take some time, and you have to listen to your instructor, and you have to follow the classes and instruction in order to get through that. And those classes and instruction, from what I understood, are very difficult. And sometimes in human time, that can take up to 1,000 years to get out of there if you want to go with Earth time. But you got to realize that there's no time there. So it's not a structured thing. It just kind of goes. For instance, when I had the death experiences, the first one I was 4.5 minutes dead, right, in 1977. And I told you that I went to this school for 2 weeks, but it was 4.5 minutes. So there's no time there.